Welcome to time period 3, 600 to 1450. We first want to discuss the Byzantine Empire. The Byzantine Empire is basically what's left over of the Roman Empire. Rome officially fell in 476, but they will have the eastern part of Rome will take on a new name that we call them the Byzantines. And what it does is basically it preserves the Roman and Greek laws, ideas, and culture. However, there were issues between what was left of Greek culture and Roman culture. So, for example, Byzantium really used Greek more than they did Latin. We're also going to see major splits throughout the Byzantine Empire. Remember, Western Rome is going through the Middle Ages or the Dark Ages. They aren't really focusing on political centralization or creating states or anything like that until we get into more of like the late 1100s into the 1200s, where the Byzantine Empire is going to last well over 1,000 years. It's actually one of the longest empires in history. And really, again, the key to understanding Byzantine Empire is understanding its preservation of some of the Roman ideas and some of the Roman cultural tendencies. However, like I said, it's going to actually preserve more Greek culture than Roman. So it's this nice hybrid culture between Roman and Greek ideals. Here's just kind of an outline of some of the important people and some of the important events that were associated with the Byzantine Empire. So really the Byzantine Empire starts when Emperor Constantine moves the capital in 330 CE. He rebuilds Byzantium. Byzantium was an ancient city that had been established by the Greeks. It was a Greek colony way back in the day, before Alexander, before any of the development of the Roman Empire. And he actually called it Nova Roma. He really wanted to create a new Rome. He felt that moving the capital city to the center of the Roman Empire would kind of help stabilize it. Obviously it doesn't. It was a good attempt at political stabilization, but it fails. This is what preserves the eastern part of the Roman Empire, is the fact that the city, Byzantium, or Nova Roma, or what will eventually become Constantinople, creates basically the idea of the Byzantine Empire and the crossroads of what will become the Middle East and Europe. Another couple important emperors you should know is Justinian and Belisarius. Justinian is actually going to expand the Byzantine Empire, and he got a huge amount of land that used to be part of Rome. He really wanted to reestablish the old Roman Empire. He felt that this is a good 200 years or so after Constantine, and another 100 years after the fall of Rome, and he really wanted to reestablish that old Roman Empire. Unfortunately, he ends up spending a huge amount of money. A couple other things that Justinian's going to do is do a bunch of building, a bunch of expansion in the city as well, in addition to the fighting. And so Justinian and Belisarius actually spend a huge amount of money and kind of overstretch the treasury. Theodora is Justinian's wife, and they actually kind of accidentally caused some riots. There was a fire in the city, and it destroyed a huge amount of the city, which is part of the reason why they're going to end up building a bunch of new things, including the Hagia Sophia. You guys are going to do some work with the Hagia Sophia. The Hagia Sophia today is a museum. It has been a practicing Christian Orthodox church as well as a mosque, and today it's a museum. So it's really interesting architecture. And basically Justinian, Belisarius, and his wife Theodora really spend a lot of time focusing on making Constantinople this massive, amazing city center that is meant to kind of display the grandeur of the Byzantine Empire. couple other things you should know about the Byzantine Empire in general. For about 100 years, the Byzantine Empire kept getting attacked by the Arab armies. Now remember that we have the development of the Caliphate in the Middle East, and of course they're going to spread into what is the Byzantine Empire. And that makes sense, because controlling this waterway, controlling Constantinople, will be a huge deal for trade and economics. And so they controlling the Mediterranean Sea and things like that are really important to trade, especially as the Silk Road has shut down and people are doing more and more regional trade. The Mediterranean and Constantinople are super important. Another key part of the Byzantine Empire is that the Arab armies have to get through the Byzantine Empire to even get into Europe. And so the Byzantine Empire is actually going to protect Christian Europe from the caliphates as a whole, because of this kind of buffer with this Eastern Orthodox religion. In the 700s, we have a split in between the 700s and 1054. We have an issue between the two branches of Christianity that are developing. So you have this kind of Greek-style Christianity that's being practiced in the Byzantine Empire. There's a lot more political politics involved in the Church of the Byzantine Empire in comparison to what was going on in the Middle Ages for Europe. We end up basically having arguments between, in regards to doctrine, between the Eastern Church and what will become the Western Catholic Church. So finally in 1054 we get what's called the Great Schism, which is where we have this permanent split in the Christian Church. So at this point, if you were a Christian, then you practiced a Christianity that was formed by what ultimately was Constantine. In 1054, now you're going to have two branches of Christianity. You have your Eastern Orthodox, and then you have your Catholic. The Pope and the Patriarch basically are going to excommunicate each other, and they're going to officially create the split between the two versions of Christianity. We will have rivalries between the two branches of the Christian Church throughout a lot of history. However, what unites them eventually is going to be the Crusades, which we will see in the 1090s and into the 1200s. You can see here where this chart talks about the start of the Crusades, and really it was about pilgrimage routes to Jerusalem. The idea was that the Christian pilgrims could not get into Jerusalem, could not get into the Holy City for pilgrimages. A lot of the early Christians did take pilgrimages. Pilgrimage, obviously practiced by Islam as well, is not something that stuck with Christianity like it did with Islam. In 1204, the Christian knights from Western Europe actually attacked Constantinople on their way to the Fourth Crusade. The knights were supposed to go into Jerusalem, recapture it from Muslims, but instead they got to Constantinople and sacked Constantinople. Western Christians will control Constantinople for a while, and at this point, the Byzantine Empire is going to kind of start to crumble around the 1200s. The Byzantine emperor is going to kind of lose clout because of the control of the Western Christians. This is kind of what we call the High Middle Ages for Europe. They're starting to develop more political centralization. They're starting to become actual states. They've recovered from the Dark Ages, and they're becoming aggressive. And that is going to, in turn, weaken the Byzantine Empire. They do reclaim the capital, and the Byzantine Emperor does manage to maintain a little bit. However, as you'll find out when you watch the Ottoman and Venice crash course, you're going to find out how strong the city of Venice actually was. One of the big things about Venice was their trade power and their economic power. And they are going to start trading with the Middle East independently, and they get crazy, crazy rich. And as a result of that, Venice is actually going to become super powerful. When you look at a map of the Byzantine Empire on the next slide, you need to note where Venice is, because geographically, what Venice is doing is basically taking the importance of Constantinople economically away from it and establishing more control over the economy for all of Western Europe. And the key to that is going to basically solidify Western Europe in the next 100 years or so. In 1453, this is the official end of the Byzantine Empire. A Muslim sultan named Mehmed II is going to sack Constantinople. He's going to be the leader of what we call the Ottoman empires. We will discuss the Ottoman Empire in detail in the next unit. But the Ottoman Empire really has been they were a nomadic group that came out of Egypt and into the Middle East and just slowly conquered. And controlling Constantinople and renaming it Istanbul is going to be unbelievably important to the Ottoman Empire. And the Ottoman Empire is going to last until 1920. So we will spend a lot of time with the Ottoman Empire. Constantinople is officially part of Muslim control by 1453. They redo the Hagia Sophia, which you'll find out when you do your assignment for the Byzantine Empire. And they are that's the official end of the Byzantine Empire. So one of the crash courses you're going to do is the fall of Rome, really with the fall of the Byzantine Empire. So you really have two falls of Rome. You have the first one with Western Rome in 476, and then you have the second fall in 1453 with the fall of the Byzantine Empire. So really the Byzantine Empire is an extension of the Roman Empire, but it was more Greek in nature than it was Roman. Here's your map of the Byzantine Empire. You can see the red line is what Justinian reclaimed. You can see that he got all the way over to Spain. So he was controlling the Mediterranean sea trade. You can see that they controlled southern Italy. They've got all of North Africa down into Egypt, the Holy Lands, into Syria, obviously into the Black Sea, Asia Minor. And he really, really took a lot of control over what was Rome. He was very successful at doing it, and his rule was very successful. You can see a good 1,000 years later, the kind of blue-gray shading is what the empire was around 1020. So it has lost a huge amount of land. A lot of that land was lost to different Muslim tribes, different Muslim groups. Some of the actual Umayyad and the Abbasid Caliphate are also going to take over this territory. However, control of those waterways in the Aegean Sea and into the Mediterranean and the Black Sea is hugely important economically. Then you can see what was left of the Byzantine Empire by 1360. They really only controlled Constantinople. They really only controlled modern-day Macedonia. They did not control very much land at all. They had lost a lot of this land to the Muslim caliphates, or to, obviously, Italy is going to develop into their different city-states that were associated with the Renaissance. I do want you to note the location of Venice. Venice being right there at the top of that gulf next to Italy is really, really important for economics. And like I said, they're going to cause problems for Constantinople in regards to economic prosperity. As more and more trade was, so when the Silk Road shut down, a lot of trading went back to land trade, and the sea trade kind of shut down a little bit. Well, what the Italian city-states are going to do in the 1200s to 1400s, is they're going to reestablish the importance of water trade, especially amongst the Mediterranean Sea. And so Venice needs to work with what will become the Ottoman Empire in order to continue its prosperity. And you'll see in the crash course that they were very successful in doing that. So we've talked about the geography here with Constantinople controlling the waterways, and the split between the Roman Empire and all of that. Constantinople as a city was built like a Roman city. It had the public baths, the forums, the churches, the columns, all of the Roman architecture. And one thing that was cool about what the Byzantine Empire did was that they really did a lot of the Roman idea of, hey, we're going to help our citizens out to create loyalty. So they had free hospitals, they had really good street lighting in the city, they actually had firemen, and the city itself actually housed 1 million people at its height. It's a huge city. That's a lot of people for this time period of the Dark Ages for what Europe was doing. There's 3 major structures. Obviously, you have your palace, the Hagia Sophia, which you're going to spend some time on, and then the Hippodrome. The Hippodrome was a stadium. It was used for chariot racings, and it was large enough to have 8 chariots race at a time. And this is good old-fashioned Roman bread and circuses. The idea of keeping the people entertained, to prevent rioting, to prevent anger, and to keep them distracted. So this is something that the emperors of the Byzantine Empire are going to continue on throughout their reign as a way to control their people. Politically, throughout the entirety of the Byzantine Empire, the emperor had absolute power. Justinian wrote a law code early on in the Byzantine Empire, and that law code manages to kind of remain in place. This law code is based off of the 12 tables of the Roman Empire. He very early on established legitimacy by creating this law code, which is part of his success and part of why the Byzantine Empire is going to last so long. They are going to use an old Roman idea, Greek idea of law in order to control the people. They had a huge bureaucracy to run the empire, but it was pretty inefficient. It wasn't like the Chinese bureaucracy. It wasn't like what the Han were doing. And it was a lot of bribery, a lot of lack of unity. And so as a result of that, one of the things that the Byzantine emperors are going to do is create this political idea called Caesar Papism. Caesar Papism is basically where the emperors are both the head of the church as well as law. And so what they do is they establish control of religious ideas on top of the political ideas, and that is going to gain them a little bit more political legitimacy as a foundation for their government. So the people saw the emperors as not only political leaders but also religious leaders. Now, they did have the Patriarch of the Eastern Orthodox Church, and one of the leading reasons for the split between the Catholic Church and the Eastern Orthodox Church is this political issue as well. This idea of using religion for political legitimacy is not new. The Arab caliphates are going to use it. Obviously, the Pope is going to use it, and the European kings are going to use it. And we don't see a split between politics and religion in what we would call the Western world, really, until we get someone like Henry VIII with the Reformation in the late early 1500s. So this is not something new. This is not something that is going to basically... It's an idea that's going to last. And the modern history, the modern European history really starts when that split happens, when religion is no longer associated with political legitimacy. Now, something else that they're going to use for politics to establish control, obviously, is the buildings. Building the Hagia Sophia, building the palace, building the hippodrome, establishes a lot of, here is my power to the citizens. Like, it shows how large and grandiose and important the emperors are, and that's something that's important for this time period, because we will see that again in Europe. We'll see it again in the next time period. I mean, there's a reason why Washington, D.C. looks the way that it does. It's meant to intimidate. It's meant to look grand. And the idea of using architecture as political legitimacy is also not new, and it's not something that's going to go away. Economically, we've talked about how Constantinople is like this huge, massive trade center, and it's really important. And as a result of that, we have a lot of cultural diversity in the Byzantine Empire. You can see the Byzantine Empire of Justinian was a huge amount of land, and so that's going to bring in cultural diversity. Obviously, if you're living in Constantinople itself, more than likely you speak Greek. However, there's a lot of native speakers of different languages. Another economic thing that's super important is that actually we have 2 Byzantine monks who are going to steal some silkworms from China, which is going to end the silk monopoly in China. And so the Byzantine are actually going to start making their own silk. And this silk is going to be really important to the Middle Ages and whatnot. And it kind of cuts China off a little bit. The Western world doesn't necessarily need China for its silk any longer. Which is going to cause some economic problems for them, which you'll see when we study China for this time period. We have 3 dynasties that we have to go through because of a little bit of a lack of economic stability, because they're not dealing with the Western world at all. They do The Byzantine Empire did specialize in a couple of products. One of them is rugs. Turkish rugs obviously are still prevalent today. Obviously the Muslims are going to continue the specialized product of the rugs within this region. Lots of cloth, and then of course luxury items. Constantinople didn't really deal with spices or basic goods. It's really luxury items, which means they're really rich. Socially, very rigid. Very hierarchical. You have the divine power of the royal family at the top. You have a massive, massive middle class, which makes sense because Constantinople and Byzantine Empire was a trading empire. So the middle class is going to be artisans and your merchants and things like that. Unfortunately, the city, you don't grow food if you live in the city, and so the peasants could not keep up with the food demands, and as a result we end up with serfdom. Serfdom is this idea where the laborers are attached to the land, and they're kind of like slaves but not really. They are slaves in the sense that it's a generational thing and they cannot get out of this system, and they're not going to get out of this system. Western Europe is going to lose serfdom as a result of the plague, where Eastern Europe or the Byzantine Empire is going to continue serfdom for quite a long time. The laboring class for the Byzantine Empire is going to be the serfs. They are not going to be able to be released from serfdom ever throughout the Byzantine Empire. As far as women goes, for socially in the Byzantine Empire, they actually became more restricted as time went on. So Theodora, Justinian's wife, was actually pretty active in politics. People knew who she was. Her name was well known. And then as the empire got moved on in its 1,000-year history, women started to get more and more restricted. They had to wear the head coverings. They couldn't leave without guardianship. They couldn't own land. They couldn't ask for divorce. The restrictions on women got worse and worse and worse as the Byzantine Empire continued on. And then when the Muslim caliphates come in, they actually continue a lot of those traditions within the city and within the land itself. Culturally, obviously, Greek and Roman. You have the split with the Catholic Church, which we already talked about in 1054. Like I said, they were very diverse in their culture groups within the city, and they most spoke Greek and most practiced the Eastern Orthodox Church, or Eastern Orthodox religion. You end up with a new group of people called the Slavs. The Slavic group of people are basically the people who live in Eastern Europe today. So we're talking about the Serbians, the Albanians, the Bosnians. All of those people are considered an ethnic group called Slavic. And believe it or not, the Russians are also Slavic. And a lot of people are going to convert to Eastern Orthodoxy. However, when the Ottoman Empire takes over this territory, a lot of the Slavs will convert to Islam, which is where we have a lot of our conflict today in Eastern Europe with things like the fall of Yugoslavia in 1999 and the Bosnian genocide and things like that are associated with this Christian-Muslim split that's created after the Ottoman Empire takes over the territory. One of the most important cultural developments of the Byzantine Empire is the development of a new written language called Cyrillic. The Slavic language is difficult to use the Phoenician alphabet with. There's a lot of harsh sounds in the Slavic languages. It's just very different from the Romance languages of like Spanish or French, and so they needed a different written language to actually work. And so we end up with Cyrillic writing. Cyrillic writing today is still used in basically in your Eastern Orthodox text as well today, and Cyrillic is still lasting, and the Russian Empire will adopt the Cyrillic writing as well. We already talked about the fall of the Byzantine Empire. It's taken out by the Ottoman Turks, who sacked Constantinople in 1453, which we will discuss more when we talk about the rise of the Ottoman Empire in the next unit.